Morning, Bill.
Morning, Stephen.
You have any plans for Memorial Day weekend?
I really don't. Tomorrow, I have a Zoom call with a person I'm going to be networking with, meeting for the first time. So I've been doing a lot of that, getting to know like-minded real estate investors, which, there's a great value with that. And then I'm stopping by a friend's house who we are going to be listing his property for sale. Other than that, just enjoying a relaxing Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully the weather holds up so we can relax by the pool. How about you?
Yeah, not too much. The weather doesn't look great. Probably getting ready to close on the duplex next week and stuff focused around that. Maybe reading on real estate, listen to some podcasts.
There you go. There you go. I love it.
So today we're talking about 611 Myrtle Ave.
We are talking about 611 Myrtle Ave, a two-family home in the Pine Hills neighborhood of Albany, student area. And this is the type of building that we got very, very used to purchasing.
Yeah, this is your bread and butter at this point. How did you find it?
Found this one directly on the MLS. So at this point in time, you look at the MLS on a daily basis, and I used to get every day, maybe twice, sometimes three times a day. Just jumping on the MLS, there's a small degree of excitement where hoping that an address and a price pops up on that single line display that may excite you to print out that listing and do that drive by, knowing that this might be another two family that will work for us.
And at this point, you were so familiar with the neighborhood that you've driven by this property, right? You knew which house this was when you saw it right away.
I may have. I certainly, based on the number of Myrtle Avenue, if I needed to look at the directions and see what the nearest intersection was at the time, that certainly made it, very specific on where it was and if it was a spot that I was interested in.
How were you able to fund the property?
It was basically a cash deal. We used the proceeds from that commercial flip. So commercial flip happened. And this wasn't too long after, I would say just a few months, that this opportunity came about, and had some money in the bank from that flip, and we just made it happen. Simple cash deal.
Was this another construction rehab or was it more of a turnkey?
This had some rehab to it. So we got into it cash, and this was a property that was owned by a woman who had owned it forever. It was in its original state. She had done some updates over the years, so the bones were very nice. We just had to get in and do some cosmetic cleanup, clean out a lot of stuff in the house, in the attic. So it wasn't horrible, but people accumulate some stuff when they've lived somewhere for 50, 60 years. So it was a pretty clean fix up to get it to where we needed it to be. So it was more of just someone who was looking to liquidate their two family home after their husband passed and move on with their lives.
And about what year was this?
2001, maybe probably no 2000.
2000. And where
Actually, it had to have been probably early 2001.
Where was the housing cycle at this point, the overall market?
The market, I would say, was on the tail end of it being a pure buyer's market. I can say that because we got into this property for about 60 grand. And, we didn't have much competition on this. We were able to approach it, have a few days, a reasonable amount of time to make a deal. And we cleaned it up, got it rented, probably owned it for a year and a half. And that's when the market started picking up more. And I can say that because we started getting calls from people, investors who were showing interest. They had seen that we had purchased it a short time ago for a certain amount of money. And now you had investors coming in, looking to acquire deals and, offering us more, not drastically more, but people started throwing around numbers, $80,000 at us, and we bought it for 60, put a little bit of money into it. So at that point, you could really start to see that, there were some buyers coming into the market.
And I think it's a good time to talk about it as we're in an unprecedented market in 2021. Do you see our current market turning more towards the buyer side again?
We will see. There's so many factors going on right now. Yes, we're in the, you would have to say the top end, of a hot market. So when is that market cycle going to shift? When is that bubble going to pop? But as we had been discussing over the past couple days and couple weeks, where we're seeing data, showing that there are apartment shortages and, different dynamics, within this market cycle that, yeah, we're waiting for it to turn, wondering if it's going to turn. But, we're also seeing a lot of confidence that this market's gonna continue as long as there's still a need for apartments, that's going to continue to drive this market.
Yeah, it's something we could talk about all day. But back to Pine Hills, was this another student rental that you were able to fill up right away?
Yeah, this was an easy student rental. We actually rented to some med students, with this being on the corner of Myrtle Avenue and Quail Street. We're now proximity to St. Rose, on the other side of St. Rose from where we started building up our portfolio on North Allen Street, Washington Avenue. But also SUNY Albany. SUNY Albany was, the largest school in the area, still is, where, students were spread out throughout the Pine Hills neighborhood. But now we are also in proximity to Albany Medical, Albany Law, Albany Pharmacy. So now we're on that end of town, getting closer to New Scotland Avenue, which had all those other small colleges. So, we ended up getting some medical students in there.
So were these tenants better than the ones you had dealt with in the past?
Similar. Yeah, they were med students, but, very similar. I can't say that one is any higher quality than the other. You're still dealing with kids, younger kids in college. Some, different roommates that you would see in an apartment. It's funny. There's always those differences where you have, one student that's neat, then they have a messy roommate, and then a lot of times you have that third roommate is the person that's in between. So, you get this variety of younger kids that, have different personality types, and they all live a little bit differently.
Is there any advice you would give for landlords or property managers renting to college students?
Yeah, you screen them no different than you would screen, any other tenants, so we got to a point where we were never targeting students specifically. We would be happy to rent to students, but we would be happy to rent to, any prospect that would be able to, fit our renting criteria, meaning, we ran credit, check landlord references, and made sure that, they had the funding to pay the rent.
Did you ever look into specifically student housing, renting by the room, or anything like that?
No, I never did that. Me and Greg never went down that road. We certainly saw some people having success there. But but once we started building a portfolio, we learned a bit more about it. But at that point, we were kind of set in our ways and getting busy, still, doing anything and everything, which kept us really busy, especially with us continuing our normal W-2 jobs. And the idea seemed attractive because landlords that would charge by the room were getting a premium per room. So the sum of the parts on each apartment rent wise, ended up being impressive. What came with that was much more tedious property management. So now you are, doing it by the room. In some cases, you're not renting to one apartment to 3 people. Sometimes you're renting a room, and then as the property manager or landlord, you're left trying to fill the other room. So it seemed very busy, very tedious to us, and where you can have additional problems, meaning you're getting one person in one room, potentially you're getting another person that could be a stranger to the other roommates in the other room, and now you're expected for these people who are coming from different backgrounds and different spots to be able to live together. And we never really went down that road because we could anticipate how roommates may have issues with each other, which ultimately could affect the tenancy. And when it affects the tenancy, the problem that may happen ends up in the landlord's lap, and the landlord gets to figure out the solution, which turns into the landlord cleaning up a broken lease or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of headaches, even though the rent is a premium. Is there anything that this property taught you or has stuck with you in specific about this property?
Yeah, I would say, kind of getting back to that tenant selection, when we first started, getting prospects from Albany Med and Albany Law, we were in this position where, okay, we are now going to get this higher standard of tenant, just because they're going to med school or law school in relation to St. Rose or SUNY, but certainly not the case. Students are students. It doesn't matter what level they're going to school. They all have they're all human. They all have similar ups and downs, different characteristics, different personalities. So once again, it's just just another tenant that you have to manage a certain way. Ultimately learning that it doesn't matter who our tenants are, they have to work within how we're running our properties, and as simple as that. So the same challenges, just like any other tenants.
I've asked you this before, but were you overwhelmed yet? This is your 11th property and you're still self-managing.
Still self-managing. I'm just trying to think now, as far as where we are in our learning curve, and what year it was, and now up to 11 or 12 purchases at this point. We were self-managing, doing all the work, still in that point where me and Greg were doing everything.
And there's nothing you do differently about this property?
I don't think so. The only thing differently, because we ended up flipping this property once that demand started to increase a bit, where buyers were starting to look for inventory and build their portfolios. Unfortunately, we were tempted by a few people that came along, and ultimately had, and this is where you really kind of get the sense that things were changing. I didn't know it at the time, but it's very clear to me now, looking back, where we had a couple people coming in from downstate Long Island, New York, and they were looking to purchase a lot of 2-family properties. They were coming in and they didn't want to buy one, they wanted to buy 10. And there's the sign. So they saw opportunity. They saw value in this Albany market, seeing, you could buy properties for, 70, 80, $90,000. And, the rents were, we were in a rent growth time. There was a high demand for student apartments. And, this was just at the beginning of that market shift where it was, certainly turning into some pretty good buyer interest. And we jumped on that opportunity to flip it. So it was probably a year and a half, 2 years in since we owned it. We sold it, bought it for 60 and a little bit to put in, and then sold it for 80, made some money. But then as the next year or two go by, market continues to upcycle, and realizing that we certainly left some money on the table, where if we just portfolioed it and let it grow, the appreciation was just kicking in.
So had you sold any other properties at this point, or is it just the 611 and the commercial?
It was just 611 Myrtle and the commercial at this point. These were their only sales up till now.
What made you change your mind? Because before you were so adamant about portfolioing the properties, and then this one you get a couple calls. And did you see the success from flipping the commercial, and that left you hungry to sell another one?
Maybe a little bit, but I would say, looking back, considering we just rolled our proceeds into 611 Myrtle, we didn't have bank financing on that. And eventually we would have refinanced, got our money, original investment back, and then put it in a portfolio. But I think at that point, the opportunity presented itself, and our cash was, into this property. So, it was fairly clean to sell it, get our cash back that we had in, some profit, and move on to the next one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything else you want to add for this?
No, this property, once again, it was one of those ones that we just should have held on to. These things are trading for, 250, 260 at this point. And, the gentleman that, came in and bought 10, 11 properties in probably less than a year was, one of the guys that we met with last week. And, he's been in this Albany market for about 20 years. And, he came in and did really, really well, building a portfolio of these properties just like we did. But he was the buyer of 611 Myrtle and another two family. I'm sorry, we did sell one. We sold 2 Kent Street to him as well. So property number 5, he purchased 611 Myrtle and 2 Kent Street from us. And, so yeah, he's still a friend. He's still a fellow investor in Albany. And, eventually he sold those properties and made some money.
It's easy to look back and say you should have held on, but at the time, you don't know what's going to happen.
Well, that's real estate. So, in the first book or two that I had read, and, the author is basically saying you never sell real estate at all. And in theory, that person is absolutely right. But in the real world, lives change, situations change, times change, opportunities are always coming up, and you got to make moves. Sometimes you need capital to keep things moving along, and you turn properties for those reasons. So in a perfect world, you never sell your real estate ever, because that's why we're in this game. Real estate has its ups and downs, but for the most part, it's going up.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
Fantastic.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, David.